Welcome to Learning English.
This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
April Fool's Day. Just joking. Even the most banal and playful traditions hide a fascinating historical origin. When, how, and why did April first become the day of April Fools in various cultures?
April Fool's Day, which occurs on the 1st of April in many countries around the world, is a day for jokes and pranks, but nobody knows for sure how it started. However, there are several theories as to its origins. One theory connects the day to the joyful ancient Roman festival Hilaria, celebrated on the 25th of March in honor of Cybele, the mother of gods, with games, masquerades, and mockery to welcome the arrival of spring. Other festivals such as the two-day Hindu Holi, the Persian Sizdar Bedar, and the Jewish Purim also focus on joy and fun during spring. However, there is no solid evidence linking April Fool's Day to these so-called renewal festivals. A common trait of these festivals is that during these events, the social order is suspended. Servants or children temporarily challenge the authority of masters, parents, and teachers. Afterwards, order is reaffirmed and the stability of society is restored. Hypotheses about April Fool's Day also include links to medieval literature, as some see a glimpse of April Fool's Day in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, 1392. In one of the stories, a vain cock is tricked by a fox, and the event seemingly occurs on the 1st of April. A very popular theory connects April Fool's Day to the 16th century, when the Christian world adopted the Gregorian calendar. Before this change, the new year was celebrated around the 1st of April. When the calendar shifted to make the 1st of January the start of the year, people who continued to observe it in April were mocked as April Fools. The first definite mention of April Fool's Day comes from a 1561 Flemish poem that describes a nobleman tricking his servant on the 1st of April, sending him on meaningless tasks. By the 17th century, the tradition was so widely spread that on the 1st of April, serious events were sometimes dated differently to prevent any possible confusion. It seems that the Treaty of Warsaw, 1683, had to be backdated to the 31st of March. Different countries developed unique traditions for April Fool's Day. For instance, in Italy and France, people pin paper fish on others' backs while shouting "Pesche d'Aprile" or "Poisson d'Avril." The expression is probably linked to fish being plentiful and hungry in the spring, making them easy to catch. The April fish is more gullible than at other times of the year. In Scotland, the day was known as Taily Day, with reference to a pig's tail, and a "kick me" sign placed on someone's back became a common prank. In Ireland, people played practical jokes by sending someone to deliver a note that read, "Send the fool further." Not everyone loves April Fool's Day, though. Pranks can feel annoying or even mean, especially if they embarrass someone or go too far. Besides, in the age of the internet, April Fool's jokes sometimes add to the flood of fake news, leaving people disorientated or misinformed. April Fool's Day has in fact swiftly evolved in recent times, with the rise of social media and mass communication amplifying its reach. What was once a tradition of personal pranks has now expanded to large-scale jokes, often shared by media outlets and online platforms, making it a global event where pranks can go viral.
Speak up.
This is everyday grammar. Imagine you are at a business meeting. You have just presented a plan to your business partners. They want to give suggestions for how to make your plan better. The conversation might sound like this.
I really like your plan.
Yes, it's pretty good, but it needs a little revising.
Of course, you did a very good job, but you might need to consider a few more points.
Yes, it will probably be more effective if you highlight the staffing requirements and expand on the budget.
Whether you like business or not, this conversation gives you important grammar information that you can use in just about any situation. In particular, the exchange offers examples of some of the most important adverbs that you will hear in everyday speech. This week, we will explore special adverbs that increase or decrease the force of a statement. These adverbs are sometimes called amplifiers or downtoners.
Adverbs are words that modify or change the meaning of adjectives, verbs, and sometimes entire sentences. They are often used to show time, a way of doing something, place, or degree, a measure of something. Some kinds of adverbs act as amplifiers. The word amplify means to make something stronger. So these amplifiers make the meaning of an adjective or sentence stronger. In American English, amplifiers have three common uses: increasing intensity, expressing certainty, and showing precision. This information comes from Susan Conrad and Douglas Biber, two experts on English grammar. Words such as really and very are among the most common that increase the intensity of a statement. They usually modify an adjective. Take the adjective good, for example. Imagine you are trying some food that your friends cooked. Perhaps you want to tell them, "This food is good." You could increase the intensity of your statement by using the word very.
This food is very good.
You could express certainty by using an amplifier such as definitely.
This is definitely the best food I've ever had.
Or you could use an amplifier to show precision.
At exactly 5:13 p.m. on February 6th, I ate the best food I've ever had in my life.
Other kinds of adverbs act as downtoners. Downtoners are the opposite of amplifiers. They reduce the force of a statement or express doubt. In other words, they set the tone of a statement. You can remember the term downtoner by thinking about what it does, toning down a statement.
Downtoners have three common functions: reducing intensity, expressing doubt, or showing imprecision. Three common downtoners in conversational English are pretty, maybe, and probably, say Conrad and Biber. How can you use downtoners to change the meaning of the statement? Take our earlier example. This food is good. If you wanted to reduce the intensity of your statement, you could say,
"This food is pretty good."
You could show doubt, even raise questions by saying,
"This is maybe the best food I've ever had."
or
"This is probably the best food I've ever had."
these statements express someone's opinion about the food, but they are not as strong as the example sentences that use amplifiers. In other words, saying, "This food is pretty good," is not as forceful as saying, this food is really good.
So, what does this discussion of food have to do with the exchange we heard at the beginning of this report? Let's think back to the business conversation.
I really like your plan.
Yes, it's pretty good, but it needs a little revising.
Of course, you did a very good job, but you might need to consider a few more points.
Yes, it will probably be more effective if you highlight the staffing requirements and expand on the budget.
You might notice that one of the speakers uses amplifiers such as really and very. She is using these words to give more force to her statement. She is probably more excited about the business plan. The second speaker uses downtoners, the words pretty and probably, for example. So you might suspect that he is more guarded about the plan. Maybe he has doubts that the new plan will be better. The amplifiers and downtoners they use are also among the most common ones that you will hear in American English. These words are useful in a number of settings. They are polite and acceptable in almost any situation.
Remember this, the amplifiers and downtoners we have discussed today are common in conversation. Different amplifiers and downtoners are more common in writing. For example, you are more likely to read words such as indeed, certainly, or approximately than you are to hear them in everyday conversation. If you use these amplifiers and downtoners in conversation, your speech will take on a very official sound. While that might be a good idea in a formal presentation or speech, it might not be the best choice for an everyday conversation.
Speak up.
The World This Week. Politics.
More than 1,800 protesters were detained in Turkey following the arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul, on corruption charges. Mr. İmamoğlu is the main potential electoral threat to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey's president. The opposition says the charges are politically motivated and bogus. Amid the turmoil, Turkey's stock market fell heavily and the lira slumped against the dollar. Both clawed back some losses after emergency interventions from the stock market regulator and the central bank. American negotiators held separate talks with Russia and Ukraine to arrange a maritime truce in the Black Sea. Ukraine said it would accept the deal. Russia suggested it would do so only when sanctions were lifted on some Russian banks, which the EU may block. The White House called it a positive step, but the truce, which covers only a small part of a much wider conflict, remains hypothetical. Sweden's centre-right government announced a rise in defence spending from 2.4% to 3.5% of GDP. Ulf Kristersson, the Prime Minister, said all European countries in NATO, which Sweden joined last year, would have to take a big step forward in funding defence. America lowered the diplomatic heat with Denmark by altering the itinerary of a visit to Greenland by a US delegation. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, had said the original plan in which the delegation would attend a dog sled race was unacceptable because it was part of America's charm offensive to pry Greenland away from Denmark. The new itinerary involves America's Vice President, J.D. Vance, visiting America's space base at Bidufik. The Israeli government managed to get its budget through the Knesset, ensuring the survival of Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition. The bill had to pass by the end of March to avoid fresh elections. The budget includes a huge increase in defence spending. Mr. Netanyahu's opponents criticised funding for projects that placate the far-right parties in his coalition, such as religious seminaries. Earlier, the Supreme Court told the cabinet to suspend its sacking of Ronen Bar as head of the Shin Bet, Israel's domestic intelligence agency, until the court can hold a hearing. Israel carried out drone strikes in southern Lebanon after several rockets were fired across the border. A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon has largely held since November. Israel claimed it killed a senior Hezbollah commander in one of its drone strikes. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed responsibility for firing a missile at Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv and 2 other missiles at Israel. All were intercepted. Meanwhile, the Hamas-run health authority in Gaza claimed that 50,000 Palestinians have been killed in the war with Israel there. It did not provide a breakdown of civilian and combatant deaths. Fighting resumed in eastern Congo after M23, a rebel group supported by Rwanda, retracted a promise to withdraw from the strategically important town of Walikale. It had announced the withdrawal following the latest round of peace talks between Congo and Rwanda, brokered by Qatar. The Sudanese armed forces said they had recaptured the airport in Khartoum, Sudan's capital, from the Rapid Support Forces, the army's main adversary in the country's civil war. The SAF had earlier retaken the presidential palace. Taking command of the airport brings the army one step closer towards regaining control of Khartoum, which it lost to the RSF after the war began in 2023. At least 27 people were killed by wildfires in South Korea, a country where forest infernos are a rarity. The fires, which officials think were started by people burning overgrown grass, were fueled by a spell of dry weather and high winds. The Unification Church was in effect banned in Japan by a court. The church was founded in South Korea and is often referred to as a sect. The Japanese government had sought its dissolution following the assassination of Abe Shinzo, a former prime minister, in 2022. Abe's assassin held a grudge against the church, and an investigation revealed its links with politicians in the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. America removed bounties from the heads of 3 senior Taliban officials in Afghanistan. It follows a slight thaw in the icy relations between the two countries. A senior American diplomat visited Kabul recently for the first time since the Taliban regained power in 2021. The visit led to the release of an American held captive by the regime since 2022. The White House tried to play down the worst security breach of Donald Trump's presidency. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, was added to a security chat group by mistake and was sent details in advance of America's plans to bomb Houthi rebels in Yemen. The chats on the Signal app also revealed J.D. Vance saying that he hates bailing Europe out again, and Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, sharing his loathing of European freeloading. Mr. Trump held no one to account for the breach. The Trump administration gave notice that it would soon revoke a program that has given 530,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua and Venezuela a temporary legal right to live in the United States. It said they should leave or face deportation. Lawyers representing the Venezuelan government asked El Salvador's Supreme Court to free some of the 238 Venezuelans who were deported from the United States to a prison in El Salvador under an agreement with the country. America says they are gang members. The lawyers disagree. Brazil's Supreme Court decided that Jair Bolsonaro should stand trial for his alleged involvement in a plot to overthrow the government. Mr. Bolsonaro lost his re-election bid for president in 2022. He is accused of devising a coup against the winner, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and of trying to undermine the democratic system. Mr. Bolsonaro says the charges are baseless. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, called a snap election for April 28th. Mr. Carney's Liberal Party has staged a remarkable comeback in the polls as voters rally around their government in defiance of Mr. Trump's imposition of tariffs and his disparaging of Canada as America's 51st state. He referred to Justin Trudeau, Mr. Carney's predecessor, as Governor Trudeau.
Speak up.
Yellowstone National Park in the western United States was the world's first national park. Established in 1872, it is famous for its geothermal activity and wild animals. It includes beautiful mountains, deep canyons, lakes, and rivers. Yellowstone is still one of the largest national parks in the U.S. It takes up almost 9,000 square kilometers. Most of the park lies within the western state of Wyoming. The park is unusual because of what lies underneath it. It sits on top of an ancient supervolcano known as the Yellowstone Caldera. The caldera remains an active volcano. A lake of hot liquid rock is about 6 kilometers under the park. Experts say this lake is under huge amounts of pressure. The pressure and heat cause geysers to shoot hot water out of the ground and mud to boil at Yellowstone. The park is home to more than 300 geysers. There are more geysers and hot springs in Yellowstone than any other place on Earth. Old Faithful is the name of the park's most famous geyser because it erupts about every 90 minutes. Yellowstone is home to the largest group of wild animals in the lower 48 United States. These include bison, grizzly bear, elk, deer, moose, fox, beaver, coyote, and wolves. In 2024, park officials estimated the bison population to be about 4,500 animals. That makes it the largest group of wild bison in the world. There is still a Wild West in America, and its name is Yellowstone.
Speak up.
You will hear a conversation between two college students, Jamie and Alex, who recently completed their internships at different science laboratories.
So, Jamie, we need to summarize our work experience in the lab. How was your experience?
It was fantastic, but setting it up was a bit of a hassle actually. The lab was quite far, and I had to take public transport every day. I wanted a longer placement, but I could only get one for 3 weeks.
I was lucky, my lab was close to campus, so commuting wasn't an issue, but finding a lab that matched my interests was tough. I had to send out a lot of emails before I got a positive response.
Yeah, many labs don't have detailed websites. I found mine through a professor's recommendation, but it wasn't easy. I also had to go through a lengthy application process and an interview.
My lab focused on microbiology. I really enjoyed working with bacterial cultures. One time, I had to prepare a series of agar plates for an experiment. It was meticulous work, but very satisfying.
Did you do it alone?
No, the lab technician guided me through it. It was a bit tricky, but I managed. It felt great to see the cultures grow and know I did it right. I also got to observe some antibiotic resistance tests, which was fascinating.
That sounds cool. I worked in a biochemistry lab and we were studying enzyme kinetics, and I got to assist with some of the tests, and it was really interesting to see how enzymes work in real time. I also learned how to use a spectrophotometer and analyze the data.
My lab also had a project on enzyme kinetics. We used spectrophotometry to measure reaction rates. It was fascinating to see the results and understand the underlying processes.
Did your lab have any other projects?
Yes, we also worked on a project involving DNA extraction and PCR. It was amazing to see the DNA bands after gel electrophoresis. I even got to troubleshoot some issues with the PCR process, which was a great learning experience.
My lab did something similar. We extracted DNA from plant samples and ran PCR to amplify specific genes. It was a great learning experience, especially when we had to optimize the conditions for the reactions.
I was surprised by the amount of safety protocols we had to follow. Even simple tasks required careful attention to detail. We had regular safety briefings and had to document everything meticulously.
Absolutely. Safety is paramount in the lab. We had to wear lab coats, gloves, and goggles at all times. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but I got used to it. We also had to follow strict protocols for disposing of hazardous materials.
Did you have any memorable moments?
Yes, one time I accidentally mixed up 2 reagents, and the experiment had to be redone. The supervisor wasn't too happy, but it was a learning experience. I also got to shadow a senior researcher for a day, which was really inspiring.
I had a similar experience. I miscalculated a dilution, and we had to start over. It was frustrating, but I learned to double-check my work. I also got to present our findings at a lab meeting, which was nerve-wracking but rewarding.
Overall, it was a great experience. I learned a lot and gained valuable hands-on skills. I feel more confident in my abilities now.
Same here. It was challenging but rewarding. I feel more prepared for future lab work and research projects. Now, they also expect us to make some short comments on last term's modules. Shall we start?
Sure. How about the molecular biology module?
Honestly, I found it quite challenging. The concepts were complex, and there was a lot of memorization involved.
I agree, but I enjoyed the practical sessions. The hands-on experiments helped me understand the theory better.
What did you think about the biochemistry module?
It was okay, I guess. I found the lectures a bit dry, but the lab work was interesting. Learning about enzyme kinetics was fascinating.
Yeah, I liked that part too, but if I want to be 100% honest, I was surprised by how much detail we had to remember about metabolic pathways.
True. What about the genetics module?
It was undoubtedly my favorite. The section on genetic engineering was particularly interesting. I enjoyed the CRISPR-Cas9 experiments.
Same here. It was amazing to see how we can edit genes. The ethical discussions were thought-provoking too.
How did you find the analytical chemistry module?
It was tough. The techniques were complex, and I struggled with the calculations. Rewarding when I finally got the hang of it.
I felt the same. The chromatography experiments were my favorite part, though.
What about the immunology module?
I loved it. The immune system is so intricate and fascinating. I enjoyed learning about how vaccines work.
Me too. The case studies on autoimmune diseases were really eye-opening.
Overall, I think the modules were well structured, but some were definitely more challenging than others.
Agreed. I feel like I learned a lot, but there were times when it was overwhelming.
Yeah, but I guess that's part of the learning process.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to the next term and seeing what new challenges we'll face.
Speak up.
Story time.
Jokes, anecdotes, and stories as told by native English speakers.
Lazy birds.
I say, why do birds fly south for the winter?
I don't know. Why do birds fly south for the winter?
Because it's too far to walk.
Tiger fun.
A police officer is patrolling the streets when he sees a man with a tiger on a lead. He stops the man, takes down his details, and orders him to take the tiger to the zoo. The next day, the police officer sees the same man with the tiger again. I thought I told you to take the tiger to the zoo, the police officer says. I did, says the man, and now I'm taking him to the cinema.
Annoying parrot. A man is on his way to work when he notices a parrot on a perch in the front window of a pet shop. Stopping to have a look, the parrot suddenly says, "Hey, mister, you're really stupid." The man shakes his head and walks off. On the way home, the same thing happens. This continues for a couple of days. Eventually, the man has had enough and goes into the shop. "Could you tell your parrot to stop insulting me, please?" he asks the store owner. "Oh, I'm sorry," says the owner. "I'll have a word with him about it." "Thanks," says the man. "I'd appreciate it." The next day, the man walks past the shop again. "Hey, mister," the parrot calls out. "Yes," the man asks, wondering what the parrot's going to do. And the parrot says, "You know what you are."
Speak up.
7 superstitions from English-speaking countries.
Are you superstitious? Here are the origins of 7 common superstitions from English-speaking countries.
If you break a mirror, you'll have 7 years bad luck. It was an ancient belief that mirrors could capture your soul, so breaking a mirror was like damaging your spirit. The only way to counter the bad luck is to bury the broken pieces in a hole and to cover them up with mud.
If you spill some salt, throw it over your left shoulder or you'll have bad luck. In the past, many people believed that spilling salt could lead to bad luck. The only way to stop this was to throw salt over your left shoulder, which is where they believed the devil was often lurking. The belief was that you could neutralize the bad luck by throwing salt into the devil's eyes.
If a black cat crosses your path, bad luck will follow. During the Middle Ages, people thought black cats were witches in disguise, and a black cat crossing your path was a sign that the devil was watching you.
It's good luck to find a horseshoe in an open field. If you find a horseshoe in an open field, you need to pick it up with your right hand, make a wish, then throw it over your left shoulder. The ancient Greeks considered the horseshoe a symbol of fertility and good fortune. In England in the Middle Ages, people often hung an upside-down horseshoe on doors to frighten off witches or demons.
Knock on wood to stop bad things from happening. If you're talking about something and you don't want it to happen, you need to knock on a piece of wood and say, "Touch wood." For example, if you say, "I've never had an accident," you need to tap on a piece of wood so you don't actually have an accident yourself. This comes from an ancient belief that good spirits lived in trees. However, when the tree was cut down, the spirits inside would die and evil spirits would take over. By knocking on the wood, you could drive away the evil spirits and prevent any misfortune.
The number 13 will bring you bad luck. In many English-speaking countries, the number 13 is considered unlucky, and Friday the 13th is the day for misfortune. This superstition is so common that some hotels avoid having a 13th floor, and airlines don't give tickets for the 13th row. But why? Apparently, the origins are religious. At Jesus Christ's Last Supper, there were 13 people around the table, including Christ and the 12 apostles. And Friday was the day that Christ was crucified. Fear of the number 13, triskaidekaphobia, is a specifically recognized phobia.
Walking under a ladder will bring you bad luck. The origins of this superstition are also religious. In Christianity, the triangle is a sacred symbol that represents the Holy Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. A ladder against a building forms the shape of a triangle, so by walking under it, you break the triangle. Of course, apart from that, it also seems logical that if you walk under a ladder, something could fall on your head.
Speak up.
The World This Week. Business.
Rachel Reeves, Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, laid out her spring statement, a sort of mini-budget. With official forecasters lowering the economy's expected growth rate this year to 1%, and the government facing high borrowing costs, Ms Reeves announced further cuts to incapacity benefits and stricter eligibility requirements for disability allowance. This, she said, would allow her to keep within her fiscal rules. There were no tax rises and defence spending was increased. Annual inflation was forecast to come in at 3.2% in 2025, up from a previous estimate of 2.6%. Indonesia's central bank intervened to prop up the rupiah after it fell to levels last seen during the Asian financial crisis of 1998. The currency has been hit by market concerns about the government's finances amid a big public spending increase and by the global uncertainty over trade. London's Heathrow Airport went on a PR defensive after shutting down entirely for 18 hours when a fire at a local electricity substation knocked out its critical systems. The closure of the international hub led to chaos in flight schedules. Many airlines will want compensation. Questions were raised about why the airport relied on just one substation. Britain's National Grid insisted that the network was capable of supplying it with power. A federal judge set June 23rd as the start of Boeing's trial on a criminal charge of misleading regulators about the safety of its 737 MAX aircraft, ahead of two fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019. Boeing pleaded guilty last July, but the families of the crash victims objected to the terms of the plea deal. The judge rejected the guilty plea in December, citing the use of diversity measures to select a monitor to oversee Boeing's compliance with the deal, rather than choosing a monitor on merit. Boeing hopes to avoid the trial by resolving the matter with the Justice Department. There was some much-needed good news for Boeing when Donald Trump selected it to build the American Air Force's next-generation air dominance fighter jet. Dubbed the F-47, in part after Mr. Trump's term as America's 47th president, the jet will replace Lockheed Martin's F-22 Raptor. Hyundai, a South Korean conglomerate best known for producing cars, announced that it would invest $21 billion in America, including a steel plant in Louisiana and various factories to supply it with parts and materials. Marking the announcement, Donald Trump claimed this was proof that his tariffs policy was working as intended. Money is pouring in, he said. Hyundai already has big established investments in America. By announcing its latest deal now, it hopes to win carve-outs from Mr. Trump's trade levies. Mr. Trump's latest salvo in that trade war was to announce 25% tariffs on all imports of vehicles and car parts to take effect soon. On April 2nd, Mr. Trump will also announce wide-ranging reciprocal tariffs on countries he thinks have an unfair trade advantage with America. He calls it Liberation Day. Copper prices shot up amid speculation that the Trump administration will soon impose punitive tariffs on imports of the metal, which has upended the market. Traders have been sending their purchases of copper, which is widely used in pipes, cables and electric cars, to American warehouses linked to COMEX, America's main commodities trading platform, to avoid the duties. Copper prices in New York are now much higher than on the London Metal Exchange. SAP overtook Novo Nordisk to become Europe's most valuable company by stock market capitalization. Based in Germany, SAP, a provider of business software, has benefited from hype surrounding artificial intelligence. Novo Nordisk, by contrast, has seen its share price fall by half since June as the hype around its best-selling weight loss drugs, Ozempic and Wegovy, recedes. Tesla's sales in Europe fell sharply in February, down by 40% year-on-year, and by 76% in Germany, where Elon Musk has expressed support for the hard right. This was despite a 26% overall rise in sales of battery electric vehicles, according to the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. The left, which once embraced Mr. Musk for his green credentials, has turned against him. In America, the FBI has created a task force to tackle what it describes as acts of domestic terrorism against Tesla cars and facilities. Nike's stock dropped to a 5-year low after it forecast another big decrease in revenue. The sportswear company listed a litany of challenges, from weak demand in China to tariffs and geopolitical dynamics, all a far cry from its mantra of just do it.
Listen as an instructor leads a discussion of some material from a psychology class.
Today, we're going to review the characteristics of sleep in both humans and other types of living beings. We talked about this some in the last class, and you should have done the reading, so this should all be clear to you. First of all, what are the main characteristics of sleep? Let's talk about this diagram. What happens to the human body when a person is sleeping? Can you start this off for us, Pam?
Well, during sleep, the muscles relax. Both breathing and heart rate slow down and brainwaves change.
Exactly. Now, let's look at these drawings of brainwave patterns. Ron, can you explain how brainwaves change?
I think so. The brain of a person who's awake and relaxed gives off about 10 small waves per second, like in the drawing on the left. But it's different in deep sleep.
What's different about deep sleep?
Well, I think that in deep sleep, the brain waves become much slower and larger, like in the drawing on the right.
Well, you don't sound quite sure of your answers, Ron, but you've got them exactly right. Brain waves are the slowest and largest during the first few hours of a period of sleep. This is called the period of slow wave sleep. Are brain waves always large and slow during sleep? Nancy?
No, there are periods of small and fast waves at intervals during a period of sleep. These short and fast waves are similar to the brain waves of a person who's awake.
And what happens to the eyes during these periods of fast brain activity?
The sleeper's eyes move rapidly. This is called rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep.
Yes, Pam, exactly. And what other name does the period of REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, have?
REM sleep is called dreaming sleep, because this is when dreaming occurs.
Okay, let's stop for a moment and make sure it's all clear so far. We've seen that when a person sleeps, there are different types of brainwave activity. There are periods of large, slow brainwaves during deep sleep, and there are periods of small, fast brainwaves during REM, or dreaming sleep. Now, we're going to compare human sleep patterns with the sleep patterns of certain animals. What can you tell me about the sleep patterns of mammals, Ron?
Mammals seem to experience true sleep, with changes in brainwave patterns. They have periods of dreaming sleep and periods of slow wave sleep.
And what about reptiles and fish? Nancy?
Reptiles also experience sleep with changes in brainwave patterns, but they don't seem to have periods of dreaming sleep. Fish have periods when they become less aware of their surroundings, but there's no scientific evidence of changes in brainwaves.
Excellent. Now, Pam, let's see if you can summarize the information for us. Which types of animals seem to experience changes in brainwaves while they're sleeping?
Humans, of course, and also mammals, birds, and reptiles. Fish don't seem to experience changes in brain waves.
And what about periods of dreaming?
Again, humans, of course, experience periods of dreaming, and most mammals seem to experience the same type of dreaming, with periods of dreaming sleep and periods of slow wave sleep. Birds may experience short periods of dreaming, but reptiles and fish don't.
That's very good. That's all for today.
Speak up.
This news story was written by Shira Ovida. Internet service has nutrition labels now. Here's how to use them. Basic information about costs, add-on fees, and quality of service is becoming easier to find. Before you sign up for Xfinity Internet service, you'll know that you might pay at least $10 extra each month if you use a bunch of data. You can see up front that an internet service offer from Optimum costs $65 a month for the first year, and then it goes up in periodic increments until you're paying $90 a month. You'll know that an AT&T internet plan at your address has typical speeds for watching Netflix or surfing the web that range from a relatively pedestrian 75 megabits a second to 3 times faster. It's often been confusing to find basic facts about the costs and quality of home internet service. Now the information is at your fingertips thanks to a new requirement from the Federal Communications Commission. Starting this week, most companies that sell internet service must show you a standard list of information, modeled on the nutrition labels on packaged food. That includes the monthly cost, internet speeds you should expect, and extra fees for things like installation, renting a modem, and taxes. These internet nutrition labels aren't perfect and won't fix the many maddening things about internet service. But we have precious little power when it comes to internet service in the United States. The information labels are a huge win in giving you a dose of power back. I'll explain how to find the internet labels, what they're useful for, and their shortcomings. How to use the internet nutrition labels. As of Wednesday, most of the country's internet service providers, including Xfinity, Spectrum, Optimum, Cox, AT&T, and Verizon, must now include the information labels where you buy service. That's typically on their websites. Companies generally sell their internet service only in select areas, or even just in certain neighborhoods or individual apartment buildings. It's worth checking your potential options for internet providers by entering your address into this handy, but imperfect, FCC interactive map. Most people should only consider companies that are listed under the technology category as cable, fiber to the premises, or NGSO satellite. That last one is Elon Musk's Starlink internet service beamed via satellite. Remember, this information may not be completely accurate. Also peek at the 5G options in the mobile broadband tab. That's a fast-growing option leaning on cell phone networks for home internet service. It's a great and, for now, relatively affordable choice for some people. It doesn't work well for everyone. Once you've compiled the companies selling service where you live, it could be only one or two, you can look up their information labels online. Find the company's website and enter your address. Once you see options for available internet service packages, you're looking to click on Broadband Facts. That's the FCC mandated information labels. A provider probably won't show you an information label if it doesn't offer internet service where you live. In at least one case, I had to click as though I were buying internet service before I could see the information label. In theory, you should see the introductory rate for new service and price increases to expect over time. You might see extra fees that sometimes surprise you on your bill. You should also see typical speeds. In real life, your home Wi-Fi may not be as consistently zippy as the speeds advertised to you. The shortcomings of the information labels. I said in theory because not all of that information was spelled out in the internet labels that I saw. Almost half of the internet information labels are not complying so far with the FCC's disclosure requirements, according to Sasha Meinrath, a Penn State University telecommunications professor who helped analyze information labels this week. If you see information labels that you believe are missing disclosures, file a complaint with the FCC here. The rules are murky, and some of the incomplete information could get filled in over time. The information labels also only apply to internet service. You don't get the same details if you buy a package of services like TV, phone, and internet. You might wind up paying less than the information labels disclose. Chaya Kapadia, Chief of Staff for New America's Open Technology Institute, said it would be better if the information labels were on your monthly bill so you don't have to hunt for them online. Dane Jasper, CEO of well-regarded internet provider Sonic, wants you to be easily able to compare different providers' information labels side by side. That might be available soon. But it was remarkable in my conversations that people who rarely agree, representatives of big internet providers, smaller providers like Sonic and consumer advocates, all said the internet labels are useful and a win for you. You're finally getting easier to find answers to basic questions. Which companies offer internet service where I live? What will it cost me? Is the service good? What's the catch? There are so many ways we can do these things better, but this is a big deal for consumer transparency, Kapadia said. We should celebrate.
Speak up.
This story was written by Becky Crystal. This Passover, make a better matzo pizza. When I was a kid, the prospect of a week without bread at Passover was a daunting one. What would my mom make me that I would eat? Matzo pizza was often the answer. Matzo is an unleavened bread, essentially a cracker, that is eaten during the Jewish holiday to commemorate the Jews' exodus from ancient Egypt, when they hurriedly left without waiting for their bread to rise. So the holiday prohibits the consumption of bread made with yeast, as well as many other baked goods. You can still have flour in the form of matzo and related products, as long as they are certified kosher for Passover, which is different from everyday kosher guidelines. Get the recipe, matzo pizza. To satisfy cravings for foods we can't have during the holiday, shemetz is the technical term, we often try to recreate them, with varying degrees of success. Matzo pizza is a relatively safe bet. Plenty of people appreciate this stand-in for what it is, rather than an also-ran. Like matzo brittle, an irresistible confection of matzo with layers of butterscotch and chocolate, the Passover-friendly pizza brings back memories of family traditions and comfort food, even if it's not something our ancestors would recognize. At its core, matzo pizza is simple: matzo, tomato sauce, and cheese. Anyone who's had a soggy slab, though, will acknowledge there's room for improvement. So I set about building a better matzo pizza with a few small upgrades, while not destroying its quick and easy spirit. Here are my top tips for how to make matzo pizza, grouped by component. The matzo. The go-to matzo is the 7-inch square. Cookbook author Leah Koenig recommends shmura matzo, a round option she says holds up a little better and boasts some of the same charred flavor as Neapolitan pizza. For something more grocery store accessible, consider salted matzo, says chef owner Michael Friedman of Washington Pizzeria All Purpose. That makes a huge difference. Prompted by my son's love of a certain delivery pizza, I decided to try some dried herbs to jazz up plain Jane matzo. I happened to recently be testing Jessie Sheehan's soda bread focaccia, and inspiration struck. I tweaked her herb mixture, swapping oregano for thyme, and applied a coating of olive oil to the matzo before generously sprinkling it with a blend that also featured garlic and onion powders and crushed red pepper flakes. Bingo! Was there another way to coax more flavor out of the matzo and provide insurance against disintegration? Everyone I talked to agreed on the need for an extra application of heat beyond that of a moderate oven, though in slightly different iterations. Among the suggestions, using a skillet to shallow fry the matzo before baking or browning it after baking, and just using a very hot oven. For minimal fuss, I chose the last option, baking the matzo pizza for 4 to 5 minutes on a sheet pan preheated in a 450-degree oven. You'll hear an instant sizzle when you set the oiled square on the pan, which is just what you want. I also used a quick optional broil, 1 minute or less, at the end to nudge the cheese into golden, bubbling bliss. Just keep an eye on it to prevent scorching, especially if you leave a bigger border without sauce or cheese, or don't oil it all the way to the edges. The sauce. People's individual standards may differ depending on whether you avoid just certain ingredients or will only use those marked kosher for Passover. So Koenig suggests paying attention to your bottle of jarred marinara if you fall into the latter category. I decided to go the store-bought marinara route to keep the work to a minimum. As we witnessed in our jarred sauce taste test, the consistency of brands can vary widely, and even the good ones tend to be too watery for matzo's structural integrity. Friedman recommends cooking down jarred marinara so it thickens and spreads more than pools, which is just what I did. A few minutes in a skillet while the oven preheated did the trick. Use a light hand to avoid a soggy mess. Friedman suggested 1/4 cup was perfect for a standard matzo. For extra insurance, Alex Levin, Director of Strategic Business Initiatives and Pastry Programs at Schlo Restaurant Group, flips the script, applying the cheese before the sauce, a la Detroit pizza. I went with the more traditional sauce, then cheese, but feel free to shake things up. The cheese. Again, moisture is the enemy. Low-moisture, shrink-wrapped mozzarella, often sold in bricks, works well. If using fresh mozzarella, thinly slice it and pat it dry, Levin suggests. I found my sweet spot of mozzarella at 1.5 to 2 ounces of cheese per pizza. Another melty cheese, such as Munster or Fontina, would also be fine. If you want dollops of ricotta or fresh goat cheese, chèvre, make them small and be judicious in the amount. Try a dusting of Parmesan after baking for a final flourish. The toppings. As with most pizza in general, the lighter you go on toppings, the better. This prevents the matzo from getting soggy and makes for a neater eating experience. Friedman says small amounts of thinly sliced onion or peppers are worth considering. My preference, minced or thinly sliced pepperoncini. If you want to use more watery vegetables, such as mushrooms or zucchini, cook them down first in a skillet. Or focus on plus-ups you can apply after baking, whether it's a light drizzle of hot honey or olive oil, a shower of crushed red pepper flakes or torn herbs, or even a modest pile of lightly dressed arugula for a salad pizza experience. Get the recipe, matzo pizza.